Am I the a-hole for telling my father-in-law what his wife has been saying about him on the internet? My wife's mom and stepdad separated about 18 months ago. From my understanding, the cause was that SD wanted to let his 2 adult children move into their home after both of his kids lost their jobs due to COVID and needed a place to stay. Mother-in-law was totally against this. At first, stepdad obeyed his wife's wishes, but he eventually heard his son was sleeping in his car after losing his apartment and told both his kids they could come. Mother-in-law was furious and would call my wife almost daily to complain about it. Mother-in-law and stepdad got into a big fight about it, and when stepdad told her that he wasn't going to kick his kids out and have them be homeless, mother-in-law left. Mil has been basically couch surfing ever since. She's stayed with us for a few 2 to 3 week stints and has bounced around to her other siblings the rest of the time. Stepdad's daughter moved out late last year, but his son still stays with him and trying to save money to move out. Mother-in-law refuses to go back until stepdad's son is gone. At this point, stepdad and mother-in-law are no longer talking. I'm actually pretty close with stepdad as he helped me with numerous home projects after my wife and I bought our first house. He feels like he's stuck between a rock and a hard place because he loves mother-in-law and wants her to come back, but he also doesn't want his son sleeping in his car again. Has told my wife and I that she refuses counseling because she doesn't think she's done anything wrong, and she won't file for divorce because she doesn't have a job and needs stepdad's income and health insurance. She also feels that stepdad won't file for divorce either because she knows he would feel guilty about cutting her off from insurance. Over the last year, mother-in-law has been posting a lot of stuff on Facebook about stepdad. A lot of bad-mouthing him, calling him names, saying mean things about his kids, and that the only thing stepdad is good for is money and health insurance. Stepdad doesn't have Facebook and doesn't know what mother-in-law has been saying about him. A few months ago I was helping stepdad move an appliance and he told me how much he missed mother-in-law and wanted her to come back. I felt bad hearing how much he was hurting and told him he needed to see something. I showed him mother-in-law's Facebook feed and all the bad things she's been saying. He broke down crying, but eventually pulled himself together enough to let me help him screenshot the posts and save them. A couple weeks ago, mother-in-law called my wife in hysterics because stepdad had actually filed for divorce. After they got done talking, my wife talked to me about it and I came clean that I showed stepdad what mother-in-law has been saying about him online. My wife was irate about it and told me that it was none of my business to do that and that I shouldn't have meddled in their relationship. I told her stepdad deserved to know what mother-in-law was saying about him. My wife told me I'm a huge a-hole because if her mom finds out it was me who told stepdad, then mother-in-law will never forgive me and it will cause a huge rift in her relationship with her mom. I know people will disagree, but listen. You were, unfortunately, right in the middle of all this. You had Mil stay with you, SD has a strong relationship with you, and both of them were sharing their thoughts about the whole thing with you. Sounds like SD even sought your advice/2 cents on the matter. Usually I'd say don't get involved, but they both already involved you. Additionally, Mil was essentially taking SD for a ride financially while bad-mouthing him all over town to anyone who would listen. Mil sounds like an absolute ta. But I digress. You absolutely did the right thing. Social media is, in fact, public. She shared these thoughts publicly, all you did was point him to them. NTA, and I feel so badly for SD. Divorcing Mil will be the best thing he could do for himself. You're NTA. What is it they always say on here? FCK around and find out? Did Mil really think she could insult her husband publicly on social media and he'd never find out about it? Did she think she could do so free from consequence? She fucked around and she found out. It's almost laughable that she expects her children to host her for lengthy periods of time when she voluntarily left her marital home because her husband was hosting his kids after they lost their jobs. I'm not going to lie to you, you have a wife problem that is potentially more serious than your Mil problem. Your wife either doesn't care or doesn't want to confront her mother over the cruelty of her behavior, making her either an enabler or complicit in this. I'd suggest marriage counseling. NTA. Your Mil made viewable public statements to a wide audience. You didn't falsify them or recount them in a distorted way. Your wife may wish to return to the status quo, but she needs to understand that this is the consequence of her mother's behavior, not yours. If you were publicly posting bad information about your wife in writing, would she expect her friends to never tell her? Hope your wife grows up and lets her mom reap what she sowed. Maybe the Mil will gain some empathy for her stepchildren. Oof, what a tough spot to be in. I'd usually say mind your own business, but the way Mill treated him and was planning on treating him in the future is abusive and dishonest, and you wanted someone you care about to have all the facts before making a decision about a relationship with her. I think I have to say NTA. The hard part is that this is your wife's mother. This could cost you your own relationship depending on what kind of relationship they have together. I don't really blame her for being upset either, since you went behind her back, though it's unfair that she puts all the blame on you and none on her mother. Honestly, I think it was the right thing to do, but you also kind of owe your wife a couple of long talks and honesty about the situation. I agree with you that he deserves to know when she's destroying his image on the internet in such a way, but that was probably not a very smart move on your part. Understandable, but dumb as now your daughter is her stepdad's place, trapped in a conflict between her mother and her husband, and if it ever comes out, Mill will probably put 2 and 2 together and figure out that she knew about it, and you already know what she does to people's image. What do you think will happen to your wife? Oh, woe is me, my daughter and her husband have come together with my ex-husband to destroy my life. NTA either way, but maybe you should keep a lookout for your wife's behavior/social media and such. If she has not problem with how her mother acts, she might do so because she does the same or similar things. This is quintessentially a values-based problem. For example, Phil has a value around family and not letting his children suffer needlessly, while Mill has a high value on independence and home as a sanctuary. Phil has a value around doing the right thing, as do you clearly. Mill has a value around security, and your wife has a value around privacy and not getting involved in other people's issues. Any navigation of this situation has to center around these indisputable and probably immovable values. They are at the core of our operating systems. Anything you say to any of the people involved should really acknowledge and address that these values are important to them. Otherwise, no one is going to listen at all, and it'll remain a shit show for a long time. In my opinion, you weren't the asshole because you felt, rightfully so, that a person you cared about was being disrespected. I suspect your wife would not scold you for your behavior if it was her that was being disrespected. If you know what your values are, and you're able to articulate them, it becomes really easy for people to know how and why you interface with the world. Absolutely NTA. I did something similar years ago and lost my wife over it. I witnessed a neighbor throw his wife outside in her wheelchair at 4 a.m. She suffered 3 strokes, and left her there for about an hour. I looked out the window because I thought I could hear a fox outside, then noticed the woman hanging over the side of her wheelchair. I quickly got dressed and phoned the police and lifted the woman back into her chair. The police came and arrested the husband, and social services took care of the woman. So later that morning, when the wife woke up and told her what happened, she went ballistic, saying like it's none of our business. We argued so many times over the next few days that she left, and I've never saw her since. I feel I'd done the right thing saving that woman from an alcoholic husband, but apparently I'm the bad one for breaking up a family. I feel your pain, mate, and to be honest, I would do the same thing again. NTA. So your wife is perfectly fine with her mother being a massive leech, using stepdad only for his money and health insurance. She is perfectly fine with her mother trying to force stepdad to keep his kids homeless, because they're not hers, and she didn't want them in the house that she's mooching off of. Your wife is 100% fine with her mother bad-mouthing SD, slandering his reputation, all behind his back on a social media setting they know he doesn't have, because she's in a snit that she didn't get her way and then she moved out try and force stepfather's hand. I sure hope you're taking notes, because I don't think the apple fell too far from the tree here. You did the right thing, and the only reason your wife is pissed at you is because she doesn't want to deal with the fallout of her mother having to face the consequences of her actions. I'm gobsmacked by your wife's attitude. NTA. Your Mill is appropriately suffering the consequences of her actions. I would ask your wife if she thinks her mom's behavior is appropriate. Despite your wife having had a rocky relationship with her mom and choosing how much bull she'll tolerate from her mom, she's acting as if her SD doesn't have the right to protect himself. She's condoning her mom mistreating her SD, and it sounds like he's treated her better than her mom has. Instead of shit-posting about SD, Mill should have been working on her marriage and trying to figure out a way for the stepkids to be able to live elsewhere. However, it sounds like Mill is incapable of recognizing her hypocrisy and is unable to realize you reap what you sow. NTA. Your Mill is a victim of herself. You feeling compelled to tell SD and him filing for divorce are the consequences of Mill's actions. Simple as that. Best you can do is be apologetic when Mill eventually finds out and turns her wrath upon you. Hopefully your wife and her mom will be able to still have a relationship and it won't impede your own relationship with your wife. Best of luck to all of you.